Hey guys, it's Echo. Designing characters can feel overwhelming. Maybe you have a vague idea of what kind of vibe you want your character to have, or a flash of backstory, or a color you want in the design. Or maybe you're staring at a blank page knowing you need a character for your coming creative endeavors, but having no idea where to go with it or what the next step is. I get it. I've definitely been there. But there's no need to stress. Making characters is meant to be fun, and it doesn't have to be complicated if you don't want it to be. I'll walk you through my own personal process, and you can try it if you want. I like to start my process by looking for inspiration. Even if I'm starting with absolutely no idea what I want the character to be, finding some inspiration will get my mind turning as I chew on new possibilities and potential designs. Recently, I've been really enjoying Milanote to gather my thoughts. This video is not sponsored, I just really enjoy using them. There is a free mode you can use, but it doesn't have very many pins available to you, though I can't remember how many at this point. It costs $12.50 a month to use for the paid version, but I personally get a lot of really good use out of it, so it's worth it to me. In Milanote, I try to make two main inspiration boards. One that is for the general world the character is going to exist in, and one for the character itself. The inspiration board for the world helps guide the aesthetic of the characters I make. Are there any color palettes that I'm aiming for in the overall setting? What is the setting? It's particularly helpful if you have a vague sense for what the story is going to be about, as that can help guide some of the more subtle details you want the character to have. Then, for the individual characters, I like to find images that evoke the emotions I want the character design to carry. For this video, I'm designing Arius, the god of life and the main villain of Cloveria. When I look at these pictures, I feel a sense of danger, holiness, grandiosity, and loss all at once, which is exactly the kind of character I want Arius to be. Now, you don't have to get this completely finished right away. You can definitely keep working on the inspiration board for as long as you want, but this is where I wanted mine before I moved on to the next step. With my inspiration board in place, I like to loosely think of my character's backstory. For Arius, I knew from world building that he was going to be the god of life. I'm making this character to fulfill a role in the story, but if you're making a character that has less direction, that's not a problem. The important part here is getting a good basis for your character's backstory so that you can make sure to include design elements that tie into the parts that might need visual storytelling. Arius was made by the Void, which is essentially the universe and brought all life forward. I knew I wanted him to be the villain, but I didn't immediately know how he goes from a new, innocent, freshly created life to the person who the heroes ultimately want to defeat. But that lack of knowledge was exactly what I needed to form his backstory. Because here is a really useful tip for making a character's backstory. If you're really struggling to get any traction on what makes them who they are, find something you do know, like their personality, their goal in the story, or even just the inspiration board you found, and ask a question based on that. So for my example here, I asked, what made Arius become an egotistical god? What kind of question you ask and how you answer is going to be really personal to your process, but for me, I kept it pretty simple. Arius was created by the Void as an embodiment of life, and then when other beings were made, Arius decided to make himself a god. The power got to his head, as did the inherent loneliness that comes from being a god, and over the centuries he became embittered and hateful. Despite this, he feels that the adoration from his worshippers is all he has, so he works very hard to keep up a just and loving persona for them. Great, so we have a backstory, now we get to start on the visual design. I tend to start with traditional media for my brainstorming. I tend to get in my own head when it comes to perfectionism and digital, and traditional media stops me from doing that. With my inspiration board open, I set to work, starting with sketching out potential shape languages Arius could have. I knew I wanted him to feel dangerous, but deceptively gentle, so the body shapes I went for tend to be broad-shouldered and narrow-waisted. Once I had a few ideas down on potential shapes, I set about trying a few sketchy silhouettes for the design. I played around with wing shape, clothing types, hair lengths and styles, the face and body shapes. There is no right or wrong answer here. This is essentially a form of brainstorming, where there is no pressure to make anything pretty, no intent on making things look cohesive. You're just taking designs and throwing them on the paper to see if there's any ideas that you really like and want to keep. I had a decently clear mental image on what kind of design I wanted Arius to have, so it didn't take me terribly long to finish this brainstorm, but sometimes it takes me 10 or more pages of nothing but this style of brainstorming. And that's totally okay. It can take you as many or as few as you need until you feel like you have an idea of what you want it to look like. The point of brainstorming is to just let yourself run wild and free with your ideas. Once I had a few ideas I like, I combine them into a few rough sketches until I get a basic idea that I can then make more specific digitally. Again, these don't have to be clean or neat or even pretty, really. We can fuss over the details once we move past the brainstorm phase. I decided that I really liked the multi-jointed wings, the long but dynamic hair with more messy bangs, a sort of shawl-like top to the cloak, and a high-low skirt on the robe. I also wanted a body shape that was sort of a square hourglass, and once I was happy with the basic silhouette, it was time to move on to the reference itself. This is the part that I think most people think of when it comes to character design. I've got my drawing tablet in front of me, my program opened, and I'm just sinking my teeth into the visuals of this character. It can feel pretty overwhelming, but because of all the prep work I did, it's a lot more approachable. I already know the direction I want him to go in, I just have to start fussing over what that exactly means. Now I know this is a controversial opinion, but I like to have the symmetry tool available when I'm doing these. I find it helps me keep things like matching eyes, ears, hands, and legs even, but I have a pretty big warning for the tool. If you use it too much during your designs, the character can look stiff and unlifelike. This can be really helpful if you're trying to make like a really robotic or uncanny character, but most of the time you want to inject a little bit of unevenness into your design. There were some details I wanted to make sure to include for Arius' design. Early on, he was really close to the deity of death, Thanatos, even lovers at one point. But as they slowly had a falling out, Arius began to blame Thanatos for the way things were going poorly in Arius' mind, and they fought. Arius did end up winning, but got a deep scar on his left side that has existed for the remainder of his life. I also really wanted to make sure to give him a face shape and type that allowed for both very soft, kind expressions and sharp, dangerous ones. I'll be honest, I really struggled with his eyes. Making eyes that can read as gentle or cruel is not something I've really practiced, so it took me a lot of tries to decide on a good shape. I also struggled to decide if he should be smiling or serious for the still. I ended up going with the neutral expression because I didn't really want to scrunch up the eyes or nose for the readability of the reference, but couldn't really make him look threatening with wide eyes and a smile. He ended up just kind of looking really sweet and innocent. But the point of this style of reference sheet is to be able to come back and redraw the character again and again, rather than try to make them expressive. So I stopped fussing over the expression and finished the sketch for his body under his clothes. All those preliminary sketches we did are really nice to have here. They made it so the hair was really easy to figure out, quick and clean. His colors were also fairly easy. Because of my inspiration board, I already knew what kind of colors I wanted the story to reference as storytelling beats, and he was the basis for the yellow representing holiness. It got a little bit more complicated when I tried to decide his eye color. While pink is what will normally represent danger in this world, I didn't want it to be too obvious too quickly that he was the villain by visual design. It's not that it's a twist, but I think it will take out some of the impact compared to, say, adding a pink shine into his eyes during critical moments. I ended up going with purple, the color for time passing and for loss. It also created a nice contrast with the yellow of his hair. Now for his wings, I went with a really pale, soft yellow. I don't want to use any plain white. In order to keep my color palettes cohesive, I'm sticking to more muted colors, while rarely, if ever, going to the extremes of black, white, or fully saturated colors. I think it worked out. His wings being more yellow helped tie in his hair and make him feel just a little bit more cohesive. Designing clothes to me is both very fun and very challenging. My process tends to be looking up inspiration pics either on Pinterest, though you have to wade through a lot of AI and probably don't know who made the original picture, or trying to find specifics on various social medias like Tumblr or Blue Sky, then taking several that I like and combining them to make something original. As you practice combining references like that, your visual library will expand, and it'll become easier and easier to make your own outfits for your characters, and changing details becomes more accessible. Now, I did end up going off script for my concept sketches for the clothes. Originally, I wanted a sort of shawl bit on the shoulders, but I ended up not liking how much it muddied the silhouette. Instead, I gave him pointy shoulder pads. I think they look both regal for the scenes where he's acting as a just but loving god, and intimidating for he's acting as the antagonist. I also was originally going for a high-low skirt portion, but it felt too feminine and intentionally revealing for what's supposed to be a very large religious leader. That being said, I still wanted the boots to be visible, and Arius would prioritize his ability to move if he needs rather than just wearing large, bulky robes. Instead, I gave him 2 large slits up either leg with fitted pants underneath for modesty. These solved both of my problems. They gave him movement and revealed the boots, while still reading as very holy and modest. His belt and brooch I wanted to represent the sun and stars. This may change down the line, but for now I wanted to use symbols that, for many, represent light, life, and guidance. And that's the thing. The best part about character design is that no design has to be the final iteration. Unless you're making something in a professional capacity, the design can grow and change as your skills or tastes do, and you can rework a character as many times as you need. I've made areas to design I like quite a lot here, but at the end of the day, I already see some things I would like to shift, some details that I think could be just a little cleaner and read a little easier. And that's really fun. This is going to be a character in a comic, so I will have to finalize the design, but the process does not have to be linear. I can go back to any stage of the process at any time that I want up until I publish the comic. His colors all stayed within the yellow scheme to reflect how hard he's trying to appear holy. He has worked very hard for centuries to create a persona of elegance, control, and holiness, and his clothing reflects it. But at the end of the day, his eyes are the windows to the soul, and his reflect loss and sorrow, and sometimes perhaps a bit of malicious danger. Anyways, that's it for how I design characters, with an example of my thought process. Like I said, I'll probably be tweaking a few things before any final designs get released, but this is pretty close to being done, I think. Leave a comment below about what characters you're working on and what your process looks like. Mine's just one example. Everyone's process looks a little different. I'll catch you in the next one.